Good afternoon. I'm Ken Paulson. I'm the director of the Free Speech Center, actually the former dean of the College of Media and Entertainment, and I teach media law and a variety of other things, including the history of popular music. There's been one constant, though, throughout my years at MTSU, and that has been Professor Oppmann has invited me to talk to his classes about the First Amendment, and I'm always happy to do that. As a matter of fact, just about 3 weeks ago, I did a lecture for the Honors College, and I thought it was pretty much on the money for what you study and what you need to know. So I'm going to share that with you today. But first, just I want to mention a couple of things why we're even having this conversation. You know, we live in a nation of constitutional illiterates. It's the single most important document in our nation's history. The Constitution and the included Bill of Rights, the original 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, which also made possible the other amendments to come, which would guarantee equal protection for all and gave women the vote and gave African Americans the vote. So these documents together are just at the heart of who we are as a country. And yet Americans know very little. We've had past surveys that suggest only 2% can name the five freedoms. But most importantly, there's a full third who have no idea what the First Amendment says. And in my work, both here and at a previous employer, the First Amendment Center, what I did was try to ensure that the next generation has a better understanding of these freedoms than perhaps their parents do. So that would be you. You're the target audience, and you're the people I'm delighted to talk to about the current state of the First Amendment and how Americans perceive it and their liberties. I think the commonality is we absolutely take it for granted, and because we take it for granted, we don't bother to learn about it. So when it is in danger, we tend not to, as a nation, rise up and say, no, this will not happen. This is different from the Second Amendment, where you've got the National Rifle Association at the ready to sue, ready to lobby, ready to litigate anytime they perceive any encroachment on the Second Amendment. The First Amendment does not have the luxury of that single, strong, and deeply pocketed advocate. This all came home to me the other day when the Freedom Forum brought out what used to be called the State of the First Amendment Survey. It's got a new name, Where America Stands, but it has much the same function, and it explains to us how Americans feel about the core liberties of the First Amendment. Now, most of you in this room, I hope, are considering a career in media, communications, something like that, public relations. And it's really important that you understand the value of freedom of the press. And yet, this brand new survey tells us that 58% of Americans believe a free press should keep an eye on government as a watchdog. Well, that sounds good, but it actually ought to be 100%. Because that, as you'll hear in the lecture, that's one of the reasons we actually have a free press, to keep an eye on government and protect against incursions on our liberties. You only give the press the freedoms it has if you want them to do something for the country, and that's a huge part of it. So many scandals would go unreported, so much malfeasance would go undiscovered if not for a free and independent press. The other number that tremendously troubles me in this survey is that it says only 14% of Americans trust the press. Well, I hate that question. I hate that question. I hate the failure to actually explain what the press is to people. You know, what has happened really um, is that we've seen people on the left and right make money by creating highly polarized content and calling it news. And this is MSNBC, and it is Fox, and it is certainly, um, you know, one or more additional conservative networks that that fundamentally are there as propagandists. That's all you can describe them as. But when people see that, they tend to say, "Oh, the media, the media." Well, the media is not singular. Media means many news organizations, many creators of content. And I can tell you, based on my own experience, that the so-called mainstream press, newspapers all over this country who also have websites and digital delivery, their standards are very high, and their efforts to play it right down the middle are very clear. You may or may not believe me, but it's absolutely true, and I think I know Professor Rotman would tell you exactly the same thing. We have beaten up the entire free press, which includes all media, because we can't, as a nation, seem to distinguish between honest reporting and the kind of garbage we get so often. So we have 14% of Americans trust the press. Are you out of your minds? That's the question I want to ask. If I were a pollster, I could never be a pollster, because when somebody gives me something like that, I would say, you're insane. I'm not counting your answer. This would not be good polling etiquette. But it is crazy. Forget politics for the moment. Just take this hypothetical. A human being who has never had power before gets elected to office. What are the odds that they will always conduct themselves in ethical, above-board conduct? What are the odds? They're not going to take shortcuts. They're not going to hire friends. They're not going to find a way to make their job pay a little more on the side. I'm not suggesting that everyone who gets elected to office is intrinsically dishonest, not at all. But we have a lot of public officials at the city, state, national level, and many, many opportunities for people to abuse their office. And who would ever stop them? And the way you stop the press, if you're one of those politicians who isn't so honest, is to talk about fake news or accuse them of being biased, anything to get them out of your face and out of your business and allow you to go on with conduct that may not meet the highest ethical standards. If there is no free press and only 14%, if there were no free press, or if only 14% of Americans believe a free press is trustworthy, we're lost. We are just lost as a nation. Corruption will explode in the worst way possible. And there will be rarely anyone to step forward and say, wait a second, this is wrong. Because they're so polarized now, it's like, oh, my guy, my side of the fence, Republican or Democrat, did this. It's not so bad. You see this all the time when somebody who's a superstar in a sport gets caught using steroids in violation of the law. You know, that home team still pulls for that guy and somehow finds a way to excuse it. So what I'm really saying here, freedom of the press is our greatest protection against human nature and the human nature that leads to corruption. It is essential in maintaining our democracy, and it is a tragedy that we have lost so much ground with the American people. Which leads me to the folks in this room. You're the generation that has to make a difference. And I'm hopeful that your generation will be smarter, will be more aware, will learn more about the Constitution and the purposes of each and every one of its liberties, and will protect them. Now here's my thoughts from a few weeks ago.